Welcome to another episode of The Catholic Couple, having fun with faith, family, and friends. I'm your co-host, Bobby Fredrickson. With me, as always, my beautiful wife,
Katie Fredrickson.
I'm the convert Catholic, and she's
the cradle Catholic.
And here we are on a very special episode. We have a guest with a new book out entitled Offer It Up, Discovering the Power and Purpose of Redemptive Suffering. We have with us Megan Hjelmstad, who is gracious enough to share her time and her wisdom in this book with us. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a joy to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, first off, what got you into, other than the fact that you went through a lot of suffering yourself, and we can get into that story, but to try to share that with the world, what brought you into like, hey, you know what? I'm going to share this with other people in my journey, because that could be kind of vulnerable. And so what led you to wanting to write this in a book and maybe just share with some people who don't know who you are, how your life has been impacted by suffering?
Sure. So I honestly did not set out to write a book on redemptive suffering. I actually had a contract to write another book, and I've been in the ministry world for a long time. I worked with Blessed Is She for a long time. And so I have loved for many years connecting with women and mentoring women, and just really writing a lot of devotionals and things like that in other settings. And so I had signed this contract to write a book on dignity and identity for women, and it just kept not coming together. And I even I finally told my editor, can I just quit if it's not ready by this time? And she was so wonderful. And she said, no, let's just see what the Lord has. And at the same time, I had been giving a lot of different talks and doing some writing, some devotional writing about my story of suffering and my experience of suffering, which at the time was progressing with several other diagnoses that I had just gotten, which we can get into. And so it was kind of the time that the Lord was giving me to really step into this mission. And then finally, I got a message on All Saints Day. I actually looked back and I found the message, and it said, can you recommend some practical resources on how to deal with suffering? And I had given some talks and things that were recorded, but other than that, I wanted to immediately send this beautiful woman some resources. And I went to respond, and I thought, oh, wait, I don't have anything to tell her. And the next morning, I just kind of woke up with this download of a chapter list in my head. And at the time, I happened to be recovering from a really extensive surgery. And it just really came together very quickly. And so I started writing. I discerned it with my spiritual director. I eventually brought it to my editor, and she said, this is definitely the book that God wants. So I did not go out to suffering, but the Lord knew it was what I needed, the story that I needed to share, and it was what the world needed, and it was what He wanted and what He wanted to bring fruit out of. And so this is it from the start. It's all been the Lord's, and it's really, I say in the book, but it's my authentic experience that this is my love story with the Lord that has developed over several years now. So that's kind of how the book came about, and we can kind of get into some of the specifics of what my experience has been with suffering too.
Yeah, I mean, you're very vulnerable. You go there, and was it cathartic to get that out on paper like that, or?
In some ways, I mean, I've been writing like this a long time. It's kind of my style of writing to share an anecdote about myself and be able to then relate it to other people. And so it wasn't new to write in this way, but I think when it all of a sudden, when it came together after I turned it all in, after I got it to my editor, and I thought, oh, this is really out there and people are going to know, that's when it hit me. And I thought, okay, Lord, well, I trust you with all of this. And so in some ways that felt vulnerable, but there was a long time. It's kind of like waiting for a baby. There's a long time between when you turn the manuscript in and when the book actually comes out. So I had a lot of time to kind of work through that with the Lord too. But yes, it's very vulnerable.
Well, the title Offered Up I'm a convert Catholic. So when I first heard that, like, offered up, I'm like, it seems kind of like a cop out kind of a thing, the way that at least a lot of the people that I talk to about it, because there isn't a big understanding about what redemptive suffering is. Like you said, you had to write a book because there isn't a lot of good resources about it. We hear, offer it up, offer it up. And I like in the book that you talk about, like, your background is that you're a veteran and that you were in West Point, and that there is a conflating between suck it up and offer it up.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit on that, especially being a high performer and somebody who's like, obviously you guys women have to do a lot of pain in general, but that's just our culture now, is like, if you show any pain, you're weak. Just that whole thing of sucking it up versus offering it up.
Yeah. The title Offer It Up is honestly a little bit tongue-in-cheek and also kind of intentional, because it strikes a chord for a lot of people, and that chord is a little uncomfortable, is even not just for those who have not grown up Catholic, but even for those who have grown up Catholic, because that term has been used almost to minimize our suffering for so long, depending on who used it. But a lot of Catholics over the years had kind of started saying offer it up to just, oh, don't complain, offer it up to the Lord. We don't actually know what that means, but don't talk about it. So we have kind of received this message, even in the Catholic world, for many of us, that suffering isn't something that we want to talk about, that we should talk about, and that if we do, we are just putting the emphasis on the wrong thing. And in fact, when we minimize our suffering, we minimize the good that the Lord can bring out of it. That doesn't mean that we need to consider ourselves victims in suffering. But like St. Paul says, I boast of my sufferings because of what God is doing through them. And so when we turn it all back to the Lord, when we invite him into it, and when we turn it back to him, that actually brings great good out of something that the enemy intends for evil. And there is glory in that. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about offering up and redemptive suffering. And so, yes, I began my career, if you could call it that, as a West Point cadet. My dad was a military officer, and so I wanted to follow his footsteps into the Army. I decided when we lived at West Point when I was little that I wanted to go there, and shocker, I did. And so I followed through on that, even though my math grades were not the best, but I managed to still get into the service academies. I was a collegiate springboard diver. I had been a competitive gymnast, and so I had a lot of athletic prowess. And I got to this point where starting in high school, I was experiencing this really intense abdominal pain, which I later found out was severe endometriosis and also adenomyosis, for which I eventually had 4 surgeries. I experienced pregnancy losses after I got married because of it. And it was really, really intense. But at that time, I just thought, well, this is really getting in the way of my goals and what I'm trying to do. And so I just kind of learned to manage it and to push it aside, even though it was really overwhelming. And so it wasn't until I really got out of West Point into the Army and even into 5 years of active duty, when I experienced those pregnancy losses and was told, you probably can't have more kids. It's not looking good, that I just sent up this, I call it my half-hearted prayer to St. Jude, a not even prayer. He happened to be our family patron. He had prayed my husband into the church when we were in college. And so my husband's a convert too, Bobby. But yeah, I just sent up this prayer. Like, we had 2 kids at that point. But after that, not being able to have any more, when I'd had this dream of a big Catholic family, and it was heartbreaking. So I said, I would love to just raise one more baby. St. Jude, could you just pray for one more baby? And it wasn't even that codified of a prayer. But then I found out very shortly thereafter that I was expecting. And 9 months later, our beautiful son was born on St. Jude's feast day, which was his birthday. And so that was my breakthrough moment of really realizing that this whole suck it up or push suffering aside thing, not only doesn't it doesn't really work. I mean, it's just sweeping it under the rug. It still pursues you, all of this pain and all of this grief. But it also ignores the fact that God is actually there, and he's actually paying attention. He's not brushing it aside like I am. He's not ignoring me and my suffering. He's not just absent or kind of distant. He's right there in the middle of it in an unbelievably detailed way, more so than I could have ever imagined or orchestrated, bringing all things together for my good, despite my suffering and even because of my suffering.
I really like in the middle of the book, you talk about that idea of, suffering in and of itself is evil, but when we turn that into something that God can work out for our good, it's almost like punching. I think you talked about a conversation that you had with that youngest son about
Yes.
that when you change it up in that way, when it's kind of like in your face devil, like a punch in the face to the devil. I loved that because it kind of shifts your brain and you're thinking the one, the one it, weapon that the devil thinks he has against us, God's kind of like chokes on you. I'm
Yeah.
going to use it against you. And I think, and to help them get closer to me. So I love that idea of God working through it and within it. And I think that's such a beautiful way when you're talking about different ways that you can offer it up, which is what we were taught to do, but to really understand what it actually means that God is there with you. Can you kind of explain that, like how God can work through that suffering as you
Yes.
set up?
Yeah. And I think what you talked about with this whole when I kind of shared that about it's like a punch to Saint's face when you offer it up too. It really brings to the heart of suffering how it becomes redemptive. And that's through Christ's one singular powerful act on the cross. And so all of his life, he entered into human suffering from his incarnation on. I mean, coming from heaven to be this tiny infant. Can you even imagine going from the grandeur of heaven to this tiny enclosed body of an infant? Everything for him was a suffering compared to heaven. And he did that so that every step of the way, every single experience that we go through is sanctified. He was in every stage of humanity from infancy on. And so it's not just the cross, but it begins with the incarnation and culminates in the cross. And that one powerful act of redemption on the cross was what the enemy thought was a victory for him, which was the death of God. And by proxy, human death, the worst possible suffering that we can imagine. And yet, when Christ died, he didn't just resuscitate himself, he overturned physical death completely to become not just life, but eternal life, so that we will never die again. And just trying to wrap your head around that is kind of unbelievable that this thing that is the most evil thing that we can imagine, it's the most painful thing that we can imagine, right? Can actually become the greatest victory so that we never die again, we never experience suffering again in eternal life, and we're in union with God forever. That's what Jesus does with suffering when we invite him into it, when we unite it to him, when we unite it to his cross. And so the ways that we can offer it up are all attached to this truth that anything we offer to God is redeemed into a far more victorious and glorious end than we could possibly even imagine. And it just completely stomps out the suffering that we're going through right now.
So I am back and forth, right? Like, so if I'm suffering, I'm the biggest pity party thrower, like I throw the best pity parties, don't I? Come on, I do. You can be honest.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes.
I throw a huge pity party, but then later, when I finally like kind of get over that, I do, find have been times when actually, again, to point to another thing you mentioned in the book where you're like up really late at night because of the suffering, or like for me, like things that are going on in my mind, to offer those things up for others, right? In that moment, God's outside of space and time. Can things I've thrown pity parties over, can I point back to those things and say, I'm gonna, even though I didn't offer it up in that moment, can I offer it up now that I'm looking back at, I shouldn't have acted that way, like that. I shouldn't have been, woe is me. I should have used that time to, because sometimes we're just in autopilot in how we react to things, to our suffering, especially. So our initial reactions are usually that knee jerk, woe is me. But then when you really start to digest what's happening to you, you can start to offer that up to others. Can I go back in time? I guess I'm asking, can I go back and think, hey, that stuff that I threw the pity party over, can I
That
still,
I went through the wasted suffering.
Yeah, can that wasted suffering still be put to good use now, Lord?
Yeah. And can it be redeemed? Can the stuff that I didn't do in the past be redeemed now?
Yeah.
God redeems everything. So absolutely. I mean, what are the rules? I think we tend to get a little more black and white about it. And I totally get what you're asking, because I have asked it too so many times to the Lord.
I was not thinking that question, but yeah, you would.
Because I throw the pity party, because again, like I said, in autopilot, you throw a pity party. You just do, like when you feel like, when I am so overwhelmed, I throw the pity party. But then looking back,
Well, I want to read.
I want to.
Well, I think the better question is that when you're in the midst of it, how do you snap out of it?
Yeah.
Like, because I went through 2 back injuries, one very bad back injury where I had to have surgery. In 6 months, I was laid up. I mean, I was taking 7, 8 painkillers and I wasn't even helping, like crying myself to sleep. Wow. So I've dealt with
like a haunted house.
Like I couldn't pick up my kid. I couldn't do anything. It was ridiculous. But what I found is once I did start to go outside of myself,
yes,
and that's the same with, our mental health. It's like the more we're focused in on ourselves and turn in on ourselves, what St. Augustine says, that's sin is curving in on ourselves. Or Blessed Carlos Acutis says that, joy is looking at God. Sadness is looking within. It's just changing your eyesight and where you're looking. And if through that suffering, how do I stop myself in midpoint of, okay, it hurts. We're not denying the suffering. We're not denying the pain, but how do I click out of, okay, all right, it's not going to,
like training yourself.
Yeah, but it just like in anything, it's like when we can take our minds off of that which is bothering us, that which is hurting us, that's what's causing the pain. It's just psychologically it helps. But what you're arguing, what your book is arguing, what our faith teaches us is that it's also spiritually.
Yes.
It's just smart to do it physically and mentally, but we have this other component where we can literally unite it to Christ on the cross. And it's that what you talk about in the book, that tension between pain and grace, where you don't want to wish the pain away, right? As a father or mother, you would take extra pain if that meant your kid didn't have it. Like, so, and Christ didn't, he asked to take that pain away in the garden, right? But, not my will, your will. And I know you also talk about how to unify our wills with God, how to do that in real time. And isn't that the hardest thing in our faith is like how to treat people in front of us the way we should, how to be in something that's really distracting and hurtful. And in that moment, how do I stop and say, Lord, I offer this up for you.
Yeah.
How do we do that? How do we get into that, build into that? How do we build in that habit on how to do it?
Yeah. That is my eternal question to the Lord. I should say daily, every single day. How? Like, I feel like I ask why a lot, but now a lot more I ask how. And I would love to share kind of 3 things along that topic. Is just, first and foremost, we're body and soul. So yes, it is the union of both of these things. So the Lord understands that we're going to react in a certain way. And what I tend to call it the first movements and the second movement. So our first movement, our human automatic reaction, like you were talking about, Katie, is just going to be like this. I don't want it. I want to escape it. I want to control it. I want to stop it, going through all of those things. And then kind of after we exhaust that, a lot of times we come to the point of pausing and saying, oh, right. God, can I invite you into it? But if we back up and we start in a place where offering becomes more of a habit when we're not in suffering, it becomes easier when we get to those places where you literally cannot string 2 thoughts together, when you are in, 7 painkillers isn't touching it, and you cannot just do anything other than lie there and howl in your head, and not even get a cohesive thought together. So one of the things you asked about, can you offer for past things, well, we can absolutely offer ahead of time. And one of the best ways to do that is a morning offering. Just simply when you wake up. Yes, Lord,
I do that at school. Yeah, we do the morning offering at school every day.
Get you in the habit.
Jesus, I offer you my prayers, my works, my joys, my sufferings, and it's all there, right? It's all contained. So it's not just your sufferings, but your joys become deeper and more profound. And anything that we do kind of ourselves without the Lord is passing, but anything that we unite to him becomes significant in the context of eternity. So everything that we offer to him can be significant and can be used for good, even if it's not suffering. And so you don't have to be going through a chronic illness. You don't even have to be suffering physical pain. So much of the worst suffering is mental and emotional, right? And sometimes spiritual. And so anything that you're going through, you can offer to the Lord. So getting in a habit of a morning offering, whether it's the one that we memorize or simply waking up and saying, Lord, I offer this day to you, please help. That's all we need. And we give it all to him and he can use it for good. And that can help us to kind of know that even if we forget later, the Lord he's got it covered. He's remembering for us what we forget for ourselves. And then moving on, and I think this we can kind of talk about, because when offering the future, we can also look at hindsight, like you were asking, there's a lot of times that I haven't offered my suffering, and I can get a little scrupulous about it and be like, well, is there anything that I can do now for that? Well, I have grief over the fact that I didn't offer it. And that grief is itself a suffering, and that worry is a suffering, and I can offer that to the Lord. And so that, again, is
a loophole.
It's like turning it back to the enemy's face and being like, whatever, I'm giving it to the Lord to redeem it. And we can go back and pray with memories even that have been harmful and hurtful, right? And so when we invite the Lord into those places and ask for his healing and ask for his redemption, he's never going to ignore that. He is always going to be one step ahead of us saying, absolutely, I will redeem this for you and with you. And all we have to give is our consent. So even that cry of our hearts, that desire of our hearts, is a prayer. It's a cry of, Lord, will you come redeem this? And he does every single time. That's who he is. He's Savior. God saves is the meaning of Jesus' name.
And I think too that, we fight the culture who thinks that, suffering, that's one of the biggest reasons why people don't believe in God. It's evil, and suffering is one of those things. Why does he allow it? Why does he allow it? But the fact is, like you're pointing out, that, he can take even those things and we can turn it in, but everybody's going to suffer. But how we do that, just like everyone's going to work a job, like you could be miserable at it every day, or you can offer that up and unite it. You can do all these different ways. But what I always would struggle with was I understand, like, offering up the suffering that, like, just things that happen to us, like my back problem, but like suffering, like, when I converted, was most of it was self-induced. I was a maniac partier, wild, like a lot of the things I brought upon myself. So sometimes God will let us reap those, consequences of our own actions. I found this quote powerful from Peter Kraft. He said that God makes us holy in opposite ways in two parts of our lives. First, he makes us holy through our own will and our own free choice and faith and hope and love. And second, he also sanctifies us against our own will through suffering, because the other way of sanctifying us through our own will and choices is not strong enough, because our faith, hope, and love are not strong enough. So he sanctifies us through what he allows to happen to us against our own will, i.e. suffering. So it's like, that's like, okay, I was hard-headed, stubborn idiot who wouldn't listen all these different times. So eventually he's like, okay, I'm going to give you that suffering, but if I would have been smarter, I would have been more advanced in my, my spirituality, I would have said, thank you, Lord. And I would have took it. That's that hard part, is that taking it as a blessing, something good. I was saying, I finished this song in Nagasaki, and he takes an atomic bomb blowing up on his city and watching his wife and everybody get pulverized. And he said, I'm glad that they suffered so that this war would end. Like that kind of profound understanding of what that means and how something good can come out of something so evil. And I think that in this world, having a better understanding of suffering in general, because that's such a big point against our Lord, But
Yeah.
he even takes something like that to flip it upside down. It's like, no, no one gets out of here without suffering one way or the other. That's just the way from the fall. And we understand that. But how your book, I think, can be transformative to people is understanding that you are not alone. You know, when I was in my pain, for the first couple months, I was in it alone and it got worse. But eventually I figured out that I can't do it on my own. I needed help to get through it. And then it was like a weight was lifted off. Yeah, it was still hurt from time to time, but I wasn't so focused on myself. So what are some other things, some insights from the book that you can offer people who maybe you're listening or watching who are going through pain, whether self-inflicted or no fault of their own, about how to practically how to do that while, you know, some tips or some things that you learn in your journey, because you've gone through a lot of suffering, and like, you know, we thank you for sharing that with us. But so what's some other practical ways that you can try to help some people who are maybe listening, who are going through, whether it doesn't have to be physical, like you said, it could be anything.
Yeah, I love, by the way, that you mentioned this self-inflicted suffering, because I was just talking to a friend not too long ago about that, and she was almost struggling with, well, does that count as suffering if it's self-inflicted? And the answer is yes. All suffering is evil. Suffering doesn't come from God. God doesn't will suffering. It's a result of a fallen world. So yes, if it's self-inflicted, it's still suffering. It's still pain. And yes, we can still invite the Lord to redeem it. And actually, that's an invitation to allow the Lord in with his mercy, because we kind of want to beat ourselves up in that place. But that's an incredible invitation to receive his mercy, which is really what redemptive suffering is. And redemptive suffering is also a place of invitation for intercession for others. At its root, suffering is redemptive suffering, rather, is intercessory prayer. And so one of the things in terms of practical application that I am so glad the Lord helped me discover was what I call my redemptive routine, was attaching specific intentions to each day of the week. Because, and this is something that I hadn't mentioned earlier, but I have a degenerative spine disease. I have very severe digestive issues where I can only eat about 10 foods. And I have to fast from the Eucharist many times, weeks on or months on end. And I have other autoimmune things going on too. And so I'm never free of pain. And I have a lot of trouble walking when I first get up most mornings. And so it's consistent and it's not going to get better. And when I received this diagnosis in particular for this spine disease, and knew that it was only going to get worse, and that I could maybe take some medications to help delay the progress, but that it was still going to get worse, I kind of had to go through this. Okay, well, we got to figure out how to do this. And I had a lot of moments of, Lord, how am I going to do 30, 40 more years? If you give me that much more life to live, how am I going to do that? You know? And it was right around that time that the Lord also kind of highlighted, I have been doing a holy hour every Tuesday for my pastor as part of a beautiful apostolate called the Seven Sisters Apostolate, which I encourage people to look up. And because I had been doing this holy hour every Tuesday, I got to the point where sometimes it was hard to get to the church, or I was running late, and I kind of thought, okay, well, I can offer this that I'm going through because of the physical suffering that was ramping up. I can offer this for my pastor too. And then a light bulb turned on, and I thought, well, why can't I do that other days for other intentions? So everything on Tuesday became something that I could offer for my pastor. Everything on Wednesdays for my husband, because I was already kind of part of an email group that was fasting for and praying for husbands on Wednesdays. And then Thursdays, a lot of community and ministry work. So I started offering for my community and the women I work with. Fridays for my bishop, which I got that idea from St. Therese, and my spiritual director, a religious sister who's cloistered. Saturdays, my kids have hockey. And so I was, many, many days dreading having to go to a game or drive them to practice, and try to do this when I felt so tired and limited myself. And I thought, well, that's a perfect opportunity to offer it again for the thing that I don't want to do, which is really hard on me, for the sake of my kids who I'm doing it for, and their vocations and their future sanctification. And then Sundays, a lot of other priests, seminarians, Mondays for the most hardened sinners and those who are close to death. And then we're back at Tuesday. And so it became this amazing just opportunity all week long to offer for when I was waking up in the middle of the night and I would go through that. I don't want to be awake. I don't want to be in pain. This is so awful. I want to escape. There's no way out. God, please take it away. And then eventually I get to the point where I'm thinking, what day is it again? How am I going to get through the next day? Oh, it's Monday. I can offer all of this for the souls who are most in need of salvation and conversion and those who are close to death. And like you were saying, Bobby, that just takes you out of turning in on yourself. And even though it takes time, we're human and it's always going to take time and it's a process, it allows you to all of a sudden consider others, and your suffering isn't just empty and futile and crushing you. It becomes fruitful. It becomes life-giving for the salvation of other souls and for the good of other souls. And all of the suffering that we go through, it seems so excruciating and permanent in the moment, but this life is really, truly short in the context of eternity, and it's passing. And so it kind of helps us to move away from that, that moment of this is all there is, into there's something more here too. So it brings us, even though we don't need to minimize our suffering, it kind of brings it into balance and brings it into context with the fact that God is here, he is doing something with it, and I'm not alone in this, and I can use this for other people. And he promises that unbelievable good is coming out of this for the context of eternity.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I never thought about doing the days. Like a lot of times what I'll do, like the Rosary of Divine Mercy, each decade is, I do the first one for my family, the second one for, the Pope, the Bishop, my priest, and I go through by name, different people. And then on Wednesday, like, the leaders, my coworkers, and Thursdays, like my family, extended family. And then it's always the holy souls in purgatory. So I always kind of have those, but my prayer life changed when it wasn't so focused on, Lord, I need this and I want this and it's about me. And it's that intercessory prayer. I was on an intercessory prayer team for a while at our old parish, but like that hour we'd sit there and just pray for other people. It was like, it felt like 2 minutes, and it's crazy how that works, but there's all kinds of ways to do it. You could do a whole day. I do like at work. I got a chalkboard. I do my workout. I put this workout is offered for whatever, and I write someone else's name. I'll do it for the week. I'll remember right now it's Pope Francis. I've been praying for him for the last 3 weeks. My workout, like St. Francis de Sales said, ask, offer, accept. Like, Lord, be with me. I offer this, whatever this is, grief, pain, suffering, worry, doubt, my work, my joys, like you said in the offering, and then do a good job at it. You don't have to do it. It's like, that's part of the other thing. It's like, if I'm going to give it to him, well, I'm going to give it to you. I'm not going to just mouth the words, or I'm going to do a crappy job. I'm going to, whatever, sweeping the floor, I'm going to do a good job at it, and that's by how I do the thing in the best possibly I can, that I gave my effort, because I am offering it to God, offering it to other people. And I think, that he's judging our hearts in that way. It doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be, painting a picture. It's got to be Picasso, or it's got to be, eat off the floor. But it's a lot of the effort and what you put into it is also, just like in everything, is that's how efficacious it could be to it.
I think you talked about this too, the idea of like the needle point, having like a hot mess on one side and like the actual picture on the other, like a tapestry.
Like a tapestry.
And yeah, we're on that side of the hot mess right now, and we can't fully. And I think that's what's also so difficult, is we're not seeing the fruits yet. So like in a workout, right? What does a workout do? A workout actually invites, like when you work out a muscle, you're inviting blood in there to actually tear that muscle down and cause it damage, so that it could build itself back up stronger. But we see that result, and even then we need to see, but even then we need to, we want to see, like, I worked out yesterday, is it any better? We want that immediate, especially in this culture, right? But we really have to, it's part of the suffering too, is to not see its fruits, that we're probably not going to see
caught up on that.
Yes. Yeah, you're not going to see the fruits of these, offering it up for those that you're not going to see that prayer that went, but we will on the other side, and so I'm very excited to see this hot mess that I'm seeing now, become what God's plan is. And I think just that is an acceptance of itself and a trust that we need to have in just surrendering our hot messes to God and knowing what he's turning it into, and just trusting him in that.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. And like I said, kind of in that example, every once in a while, the Lord kind of flips over the corner so you get a glimpse. And those are the moments that really sustain us. So it's not like the Lord is leaving us to fend for ourselves. Like, here's this hot mess, then good luck. You know, I know what it looks like, but I'm not sharing any of that with you. Like he gives us
Glimpses.
enough that we need to kind of continue and persevere. And of course we have to receive those. But for example, I had a last year, really rough Friday. I was at a conference, giving a talk. I had been sick, and even at the doctor's the week before, dealing with a lot of the digestive issues that I have. And so it was a rough morning. I was like, Lord, just help me not have to run off stage. You know, that's all I'm asking. Just help me be able to remain up here, keep saying the words, and then we'll be good. And then I had to catch a flight home. And the Lord sustained me. It wasn't easy, but I got through it. Didn't feel great. And when I got home, I was flying home because my boys were being confirmed the next day. And so on Fridays, I offer for my bishop, and Bishop is there the next day on Saturday during their confirmation. He's meeting with the confirmandi. He's sharing all of these things. And he's talking about the day before how he was also traveling. And he was at an airport, I believe it was in North Dakota. I could be wrong. Might have been South Dakota, but one of the Dakotas, I think, and tornadoes came through, and they were all in the airport bomb shelter together. And I realized it was like this moment of clarity. That's what I was offering for yesterday. Every Friday I offer for my bishop. And I kept thinking, okay, well, someone must need something today. And the Lord flipped over the corner for me of that tapestry and showed me, this is what your offerings were doing. They were for literal physical protection of your bishop. And so it's kind of amazing sometimes to realize. And one of my favorite quotes that has sustained me that I share in the book comes from Jesus talking to St. Faustina, and it's recorded in her diary. And he says, "You will save more souls through prayer and sacrifice than a missionary in all his preachings and sermons." Imagine more souls through prayer and sacrifice than a mission in all his preachings and sermons. But then Jesus goes on to say that even if you experience repugnance and dislike for suffering, do not be afflicted. Don't be afflicted if you experience repugnance and dislike for suffering. Repugnance is pretty strong aversion, right? Yeah. He says all its power rests in the will. And so these contrary feelings, far from lowering the value of the sacrifice in my eyes, will enhance it. And so when we're talking about, am I embracing my suffering well? A lot of times it's, I don't like this. And actually we shouldn't like suffering because being masochistic isn't healthy. I mean, it's a scandal. Suffering is a scandal. Jesus himself asked, Lord, let this cup pass from me. But it's always the assent of the will that allows the Lord to use it for good. And so it's not that we're embracing our cross with all these lovey-dovey feelings of this is so great. It's like, this is so hard. And Lord, I trust your words that you are with me uniting the suffering to you, saving more souls simply by me lying in pain and lifting my pain to you, or dealing with this, really heavy thing that I'm walking through and offering it to you, than all of the homilies that I heard this week.
Yeah. And I think that, this time of Lent, it's very important, like you said, is that there's this training, that Lent is like a training ground for offering it up and doing these things when the times aren't so bad. We're like proactively doing it. We're we're not as strict as we used to be back in the day, but we should be pushing it to where you can take it to fast longer, to pray more, to do these things that cost when the things are going good. So when they get bad, because it's going to at some point, you're going to suffer some way, job loss or physical ailments or these things. So
muscle memory.
Yeah. So this training, Father Mike's series he's been doing on this Lent, it's like the dojo is the place of training. Training for what? Training to the cross, for the cross, training to be like Jesus and how he handled the suffering. Do you want to be that person at your mom's funeral who's making it worse, or is going to be the one who's helping to help everybody else and help the suffering of everybody else? So it's this training in the times before the storm. So when the storm comes, you're not freaking out and drowning, that you're keeping your eyes focused on Jesus, and that you can use that suffering and to be able to recognize it. I think Lent is, you know, you've talked about, Amazon, and we get whatever we want, whenever we want. Like, we have to self-impose some suffering sometimes because we have it so good and affluent here in America. I mean, God bless you and all on you're going through a lot more than most people. But for most people who are listening and watching, they're not dealing with that stuff. The worst thing is like, oh, I got my coffee from Starbucks and they put the wrong thing in it. Or, my order, I had to stand and talk to somebody actually in a line, So it's just like, Lent is a beautiful time to try to stretch ourselves, and if we're getting closer to Holy Week here. So like maybe Holy Week's an opportunity to stretch it even more, to try to see how far we can suffer voluntarily. Some, like, maybe go a whole day without meat, or an extra day without meat, or actually fast, or do a holy hour for somebody else, but trying to help prepare ourselves for when the times do get tough, that we have that in our bag of ways to help in those times, that we have that as a tool. That's one thing that naturally would come out when I'm suffering or something bad happens. Okay, I know how to fast, I know how to pray, I know how to offer it up. It's like, but it's having that practice, that putting it in, that training.
I want to switch it a little bit into parenting mode, if I might, for a minute, because I feel like there is in modern parenting, it seems to be quite the trend to try to ensure that your child experiences no hardships or suffering, to clear all obstacles out of their path. And so, as an educator for a very long time, I've seen a huge uptick in kids that can't cope with regular everyday things, and as a result. And so, as a parent, it is so hard. You talked about, like, you want to take your kids. One of you said something about like taking your child's suffering away. You want to take it on them if you have to, but at the same time, we want our kids to be resilient. We want our children to offer it. We want them to understand that life is, you're going to suffer, but to suffer it in a way that we're all talking about, right? But this is an adult conversation. It's a difficult idea for kids. How do you, as a parent, convey this message to how your children can understand, like, that, you could do hard things, that something's difficult to overcome it. So any advice on parents teaching that kind of resiliency and what offer it up truly means, to your kids?
Yeah. I could say so much. Speaking of Father Mike, I remember several years ago now, he gave, I think it was a talk at Seek, entitled something like Anti-Fragile Faith. And he talked about Zamboni parents. And of course, as a Hawkins family, my ears perked up and I was like, this is awesome. What's he going to say? And he talked about, we used to have helicopter parents that hovered. Zamboni parents go ahead of their kids and they smooth the ice so that there's nothing in the way, that nothing can trip them up. But then the first obstacle that the kids encounter, then they're useless. They have no skills, no resilience. And so how do we actually approach that? And it's such a good question. I mean, we talk about this all the time at home. We're constantly talking about suffering and difficulty, and so it's a constant conversation. But I think some of the language that's helpful. I have 3 teens right now. My and they are delightful and wonderful, but we have moments where it's really hard. And one of the consistent conversations we have with one teen is, how am I ever going to use this math? This particular child is not a math whiz, doesn't love math. And I totally get it. I was the same way. And so when this child is asking, what do I need this for? Why do I even have to learn this? You say, well, it's not necessarily the math itself. It's the fact that in life, you're going to have to do a lot of things that you don't want to do consistently. And so this is building virtue. And so we talk a lot about fortitude and being able to build virtue and being able to do those things that you're called to do that aren't easy and that aren't desirable in terms of the comfort of the world, but that have a much bigger return. And I don't think that you can talk about suffering without talking about the glory of heaven and the fruit. And so I think it's really important to balance that, especially when talking to kids. Like, what are the things that you're looking forward to just normally. And how can we meditate on the goods of heaven and what you're actually training for? Because if you don't know the goal, then you don't really have a reason. Talking about, you have so many good training analogies, you too. If we don't know what we're training for, then what's the point of training? It's really easy to beg out of that training. It's really easy to say, I'm sore, I'm going to skip leg day. So
yes.
yeah. But if you know, I'm training for this triathlon and it's coming up on this date, then so while we don't know the date that we're going to be asked to render an account, we know that we are training for heaven and we're training to be saints, and that we don't want to waste time being saints. We love St. Augustine, but he said, give me these virtues, but not yet. And we want these virtues now, and it's not up to us to develop them. It's up to God to develop them in us, but we need to give him access, and we need to do the best that we can in meeting these challenges to say, okay, this is hard, I don't want to do it, and tell that to God and be honest with God so that he can come and help. And that's, one of my favorite prayers, and we talk about it with the kids all the time too, is, Lord, I don't want to, I don't feel like it. Lord, I'm scared. And just consistently communicating that to the Lord. Nature abhors a vacuum, right? So if we're not communicating it to the Lord, if we're just feeling it ourselves, we're going to spin out an interpretation in our own heads, or the enemy's going to come in and try to give his interpretation. And so it's really good to just be able to encounter these things with a habit of being honest with the Lord, of relating them to the Lord, of acknowledging that I'm feeling these feelings, and then he can help us with that training that we need.
So what were the three things that you say? I'm scared. Or just those.
I'm scared. I don't feel like it. I don't want to.
Yeah.
This is hard.
You say to God and say, come into this. Just be vulnerable and honest with a prayer. I think that's a beautiful, and I think that, you're obviously showing them, they have a unique situation with what you're going through. They're watching you handle your sufferings, with that grace, with that prayer. And I think how we handle our own life's sufferings can also be because what is it? More is caught than taught, right? We can speak all these things, but then they watch me have the pity party. I got to make sure I
always say that men have just been going to work and doing very hard things for a lot of years and never mentioned anything about it. That's like that leads me to what I was going to say, is that especially for men, it's very hard for us to be vulnerable about pain and suffering and those kinds of things.
Not think that you're dealing with anything.
It's just like, no, our culture is suck it up. It's okay. Well, the greatest generation, World War II, they never talked about their feelings or suffering, and they just kept it to themselves and suffered silently. Like Jesus did on the cross. He just kept his mouth shut and he didn't. So it's one of those things where it's like, obviously for our kids, if they're actually suffering versus doing hard things, with two different things. Like if your kid's got cancer, it's not like, hey, okay, trying to understand and let them see that, the fruits from that, obviously that would be the joy. But, in their little minds and, their immaturity, they're not mature enough yet. Some may be advanced, but, she's had kids at her school who's had cancer and overcome cancer. And I'm sure that's a tough conversation. That's just a different thing of, suffering like that versus like, hey, figuring out how to do hard things,
how to have difficult conversations, friend group,
those kinds of things.
Doing even just in schoolwork and
it can be just as bad as physical pain. I'm not minimizing it.
No,
I love that.
But I think it's our job to help navigate those things, not eliminate. Navigate, eliminate.
Because some of those things, I love that C.S. Lewis quote is that, God, he whispers in the good things, but he shouts to us in our pain sometimes. And sometimes he needs that megaphone to get our attention because all those things weren't working. So sometimes he uses that's mental anguish or, crying or anxiety or depression or actual physical pain. He uses those things to try to grab our attention sometimes. And most of the time it's like, that isn't our preferred method, but we didn't listen for all the good times. It's just like, sometimes he has to shake us. And the best way to do it is, especially through a health thing. It's like, we take it for granted every day. Like my back, I never thought twice about it until I heard it. And then it's like everything. And that's, that's the wish that people who are suffering is their one prayer is to be healthy, you know, and people don't understand it. So you're with it. So just to finish up, we do appreciate all the time we're getting going here, but this book, Offer It Up, Discovering the Power and Purpose of Redemptive Suffering. I just want to thank you for sharing and being vulnerable and taking the time. But what I was thinking is, like, we need to get some kind of person, because I've heard Mother Teresa say about suffering. We have so much wasted suffering in like nursing homes that imagine if we took the hospitals and the nursing homes and took those as like super cells of redemptive suffering prayer. And I'm for real, like, people to go there. I know it's a lot easier said than done, but to just like get one person, one Catholic goes to a nursing home, makes a relationship, goes there and tries to find a way to, you know, could you imagine? You know, it's like, it's a lot of wasted suffering there, that there's so much in hospitals and nursing homes, that if we were able to harness that power for good, like, the world would be a different place for sure.
Mother Teresa actually discovered this woman who wanted to be a missionary of charity, but then wasn't able to because of her chronic suffering. She also had a spine condition. And so she established the Link for Suffering Coworkers. And so every single missionary of charity is still matched with someone who cannot serve in the same way because of their chronic suffering. But the missionary of charity offers all of their works and their mission for the suffering sick person, and the sick person offers all of their suffering for the missionary of charity. And Mother Teresa discovered that that was the key to unlock this superpower, like you said, of redemption that just fuels so much good in the world.
That's amazing.
I remember I read that in the book too. Yeah, that was beautiful.
Is so cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of other good stuff in there. I'm going to finish it hopefully the next couple of weeks, but it's one of those books, like, you can't just barrel through it. You know what I'm saying?
No, I had to digest
it's
it
like,
slowly. Yeah.
You should really think about it, and it should challenge you, because, you know, we shouldn't be throwing pity parties. We should be trying to find a way to not waste it, to use it, to help it, and to unite it for what is lacking in Christ. Like it says in Colossians, that, you know, it's our participation in it. He wants us and he invites us as his church to help be co-redeemers and helping other people through our intercessory prayer. So Megan, we really do appreciate you taking all this time, sharing your journey. Where can people find you on socials and your website, if you want to share that? And what's the best place to get this awesome book, Offer It Up?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Offer It Up is available at the St. Paul Center, so stpaulcenter.com, stpaulcenter.com, or you can go to my website, meganhjelmstad.com, and you'll have to look at the spelling for that, because I've got a Norwegian last name that is awesome.
Yeah, I'm Norwegian as well. Yeah. We get, and we'll put it all in the captions. We'll put it on our socials. Yeah. What's the best socials to find you?
Yep, I'm at Positively Imperfect, and that's got 2 underscores between positively and imperfect. So you can find me there, and that is one fast that I am trying for Lent to at least not, even though I'm not off social media completely, I'm trying to at least temper it. So working on that, but I am there every once in a while.
And then you also do speaking and mentorship as well. You still involved with Blessed Is She as well?
Yes, I write for Blessed Is She, spiritualdirection.com, and then also do some individual mentorship for women and writing.
Awesome. Thank you for all that you're doing, and you know, just sharing. And we were just talking about this in our men's group, is that, you know, God gives us these things, like with my back surgery, like I'm helping 3 guys at work who have back problems. Like he wants us to take those things that we're going through to help other people who are going to come do that after you. It may not be exactly, but it's usually pretty close to God finds a way to put those people for you to go and help those people.
I will say that actually has been, and for my daughter anyway, that has been the conversation that has helped her when she's going through something difficult. Like feeling left out, right? Well, now you know what it feels like. So now you'll know to look for the person that's left out, right? Like, and you know what I mean? Like, so I think that that's a really good way to talk about things with your kids. Like, well, maybe God's having you be that person, you know, to help someone else through the thing you're going through. So don't let that, you know, I think that was Lady Gaga that talked about something really bad that happened to her and how she wouldn't take it away because now she can help people that have gone through the same thing. So I think, and you know, she was raised Catholic, so I'm gonna chalk that up to some kind of Catholicism, deep underlying Catholicism. Catholicism there, you know, that she uses that, and that she's saying those things so that people can think, yeah, like it's not going to go to waste if I go to help others with that thing I'm going through. Exactly. So thank you. Thank you so much for your amazing ministry, for this, for being so vulnerable, and just knowing it. You might not see that fruit, but there's others out there that are taking this and taking your story and really truly getting through something difficult themselves through your
Well,
grace. Thank you.
all glory to God. He redeems all things.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. You have a beautiful night.
Thank you both. God bless you.